Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure if you can hear me, but we have no sound. Jean, are you hearing anything? Mr.
Nope.
Mayor, we can't hear anything. We still have no sound.
I can't hear anything either.
Chuck, I can see your head. If you can hear me, shake your head. Cool. Okay, you can hear us. We cannot hear you.
Now, Dan, it's you.
I barely heard something of you, Chuck.
Andy,
Like if I was an ant, I would imagine an ant would hear this way. I think they're restarting us for those of us online. We've had this happen once before. Hi, Jennifer. Do you go by Jennifer or Jen?
Oh, whatever.
Okay.
I'm easy. I joined on the phone though, so that's why I was having an echo. I just was trying to hear it some way or another.
Yeah, it's just not coming through. They'll get it figured out. Chuck's good.
Yes, they're very good.
I hear you, Sherry.
Good. Hi, Quinn.
Hi.
We'll just have our own little side conversation and they can look at us. I see you, Mr. Mayor. So Chuck, it looks like city council is unmuted and I'm unmuted, but occasionally I get like a little noise. It sounds like a microphone. So, you know,
Are you volunteering?
oh, I can barely hear something.
When I came on at 5:30, you could hear them all. But then that went away.
Thank you.
And you can't hear them on the telephone link either. I could hear the Blue Jeans participants, but not the folks in the meeting room.
Thank you for that feedback. Looks like he's going to restart us again and try again. Please stand by while we have technical difficulties figured out here. Looks like they haven't got joined back up with us yet.
Hear us now?
Barely. Yeah, let's try one more time.
Check, check, check.
Hi, Sherry.
Hey,
Much better. Thank you. Perfect.
Welcome, commissioners. I appreciate y'all being
It was short-lived. We cannot hear you, the mayor.
Can you hear me?
I can hear that.
Hello, can you hear us in the council chambers?
I can hear you.
There we go.
I don't know what Terry didn't show up. You have him sit next to me. All right, can you hear me?
Much better. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Sullivan, why don't you start us off?
All right, I will just be brief. So every year, the city council and the planning commission are required to sit in joint session. Primarily, we usually do the adoption of the planning commission's work plan, which is the second item on your agenda. The first item on the agenda is a presentation regarding as part of the Parks, Trails, and Open Space Plan project. It's a conditions report assessment, so it's not looking into how do we solve these problems or what are we going to build. At the current condition and assessment of our current facilities that we would need to have a plan to deal with, in addition to how we're going to build other things in the parks. And so tonight we have Gene Akers online and Scott Melbourne, who are going to walk you through a presentation of an assessment they did of our parks for a number of different maintenance, ADA issues. Like I said, we're not coming up with here's the solution tonight. This is more of a informational item to share with what the current assessment and condition of our current parks are. So with that, I'll turn it over to Gene Akers and to Scott Melbourne. Gene is with Conservation Tech, who is the prime, and then Scott is with MXM Landscape Architects, who is one of the sub-consultants to Conservation Tech on this. So with that, I will turn it over to the consultants. I think, Gene, you're going first.
Yes, thank you. Okay, great. So you can go ahead. Yep, there you go. So what we're doing here is the baseline analysis for the parks, trails, and open space conditions. Let me stop for a second. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yep. Gene.
Clear? Okay, good. All right. So this is a physical assessment of the parks, trails, recreational amenities, and here we want to identify any potential needs for improvement or replacement, renovation. The site visits were conducted by 3 or maybe 4 different landscape architects, giving a number of sets of eyes on the visible conditions that we saw in the parks and on the trail, and looking at things that may affect operational issues, say condition of turf, condition of pavement, that sort of thing. We assess all these amenities, and then we identify any existing deficiencies. And this really provides sort of a basic site analysis of here's what we've got, here's how they are doing well or not doing well. And there's a bunch of categories that we're using as we start to assess all this. And most importantly in this process, so first of all, it's landscape architects who are experienced in parks and park design, park management, park provision. So we have a pretty good eye about issues that occur in parks and how the public perceives parks and reacts with them. So one of the things that we are looking at is considering what would be the first impression you might have as a park user when you go to a facility for the first time. Because for a lot of us, this was our first time visiting all the parks and trails in Bonnie Lake. So we have the perspective of a new user or a new visitor, as well as someone who is among a number of peers of park users ourselves, and then peers as landscape architects and professionals, comparing these conditions with conditions in other park systems throughout the Pacific Northwest and beyond. So we have a pretty good sense of what's acceptable, what isn't, and how to sort of rate and rank where everyone is in this process. So we do next slide, please. This one. Okay. So the thing to be aware of is we're conducting a visual observation. So this assessment is based on what is clear to see of all your physical assets. We're looking at things like, is easy access? Are there tripping hazards? Are the courts playable? Can we find things? Can we navigate? Can we get in from the parking lot? Are there restrooms? Are they open? A number of different things that look into safety and maintenance and accessibility issues. And you can see here Scott, who conducted a number of these assessments, trying to get into the tennis courts, and he can almost do it. We were able to get in. But so we're looking at these, and we're looking also at the inventory of all the amenities. How many benches are there? How many picnic tables? And what are the recreational opportunities? And by taking this baseline inventory, that helps us then consider what might we be missing when we then go through other parts of this whole park trails, open space planning process. So next slide, please. So we go through an overall assessment, and we're looking at individual amenities, what types are there, what are the park structures, what are the site furnishings from picnic tables to bollards to bike racks. And in that process, we're trying to assess, are they working? Are they not working? Are there some considerations with, say, the general landscape or your green infrastructure? How's the pavement look? We're also looking at ADA issues. Is it accessible? Is it universally accessible? Who would be able to get in and who couldn't be able to get in to, say, play on the playground or swing on the swings? So the ADA issue, I will just clarify, is not a thorough ADA assessment, but it's a pretty quick overview of, whoa, we see some triggers, we see some issues here, we see some barriers. So we're going to highlight that in this process. It does not replace an ADA transition plan. So we're looking at these, we're thinking about how they work for folks who are using the parks now, and then we may be thinking about what are the possibilities for the future and how can we incorporate any safety issues or other issues we see as we move along. So next slide. Scott, you want to take it from here?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jean. Thank you again, everyone, for inviting us to join you this evening. And, you know, just building off of what Jean has described there, what we're attempting to do is help and develop this initial kind of broadly based assessment to give a snapshot of what are really your current resources. And of course, we recognize how, you know, at the core, what's really amazing is that you have these spaces set aside as park spaces, and that they have all kinds of important uses currently, but we know that their value will almost certainly just be increasing over time. And so this assessment of the current conditions is being done really with an eye towards the future. And essentially, as those changes come over time, what might be some of the required updates, but then also some of the opportunities. So what I'll do right now is I'll walk you through specific examples and a little bit more detail of what the criteria are that we're looking at. And then Jean will wrap up by giving you a summary of essentially what that all adds up to in this kind of preview of our report for the assessment. So certainly accessibility is a really important issue. And so with that, with these ADA standards, we're looking at what are the minimum requirements that are going to be required, that are going to be needed for newly designed and constructed or altered facilities by a local government. And so we're looking at things for how Title II and the ADA requires agencies to give people with disabilities really an equal opportunity to benefit from all of the programs and services and activities of these facilities. And so, of course, parking is one very clear example we're all very familiar with in our daily lives. But that's just one snapshot of kind of just one moment in the making use of the facilities, getting from the parking areas to the parks themselves. It also importantly deals with gaining access to the amenities. So looking at some of those amenities and the specific site elements in greater detail, you see a list here. It gives you a sense of that range. And of course, it's not just about having those facilities or those amenities be reachable by visitors to the park who have a broad range of abilities, but also being able to make use of those amenities as well. So that everything from a drinking fountain that's going to be have a space that a person might be able to roll up to, or having things like the restrooms be accessible, or having picnic shelters and tables where at least some of those spaces are allowing for people to gain easier access. Looking at the physical barriers, we can all just, with these kind of concerns and interests in mind, kind of look at the world around us and see how there might be real challenges for people to fully make use of some of the resources that are available. And so that's another area that we're looking at. And that's not only the pathways, but also the play equipment itself, and even thinking the surfacing and whether that surfacing is accommodating for a range of different users. And in the end, it's really about providing these opportunities for a a range of children and caregivers, whatever their level of mobility. So, so your facilities, of course, there's not just the park spaces themselves and the gathering spaces and things like the wonderful lake access, et cetera, but it's also the trails and other forms of outdoor recreation. And so with these requirements, there's also this understanding that there's a need to have a reasonable level of access to these outdoor recreation facilities. So that could be things from trails themselves and trailheads, then even site furnishings within those spaces. Examples of other kinds of outdoor recreation demanding this level of access are listed. We're also looking at issues of safety. And of course, with safety, that can come in many different forms. It can come from play equipment itself that maybe is a little bit outdated or damaged. It could be landscape features, natural landscape features that pose some threat and that we know we don't want there to be bad surprise with that. Or it could even be more environmental and really kind of atmospheric and thinking about, are these outdoor spaces within our parks spaces that people will feel comfortable? This little jog off of Allen York Park, I think is wonderful and delightful, and I love the transition. And one of my favorite photos is looking the other way from within and having that proscenium kind of frame. But at the same time, not all of us, at dusk would necessarily feel comfortable moving within that space. So those are all the kinds of things that we're paying attention to. Last on safety itself, also looking at site furnishings. And so that could be everything from bleachers and kind of what current standards are. Also things like bollards and what you see on the right, and taking some of what Jean described there as this knowledge learned from other places, especially some negative examples, and anticipating kind of future challenges and making sure that the city basically avoids potential issues. So in this case, a low, dark bollard could be quite a dangerous thing for a cyclist at night. All right, just a few more of these different criteria. We're also looking at durability. That can be everything from structures and their physical integrity and how they're weathering over time, but also surfaces and play surfaces and what might be some impacts of soil compaction and subsidence over time. Also thinking in particular about, with regards to durability, with playgrounds. Playgrounds have a very particular kind of life cycle where they're not designed to last forever. The materials will start breaking down and weathering at their own kind of pace. And so part of this assessment is seeing kind of how and where these play structures have been put in place and kind of what their current state is, and which of those might be able to stay in place for quite a long while, and which might be coming up for some kind of future replacement. Last, and very much in a positive sense, we're looking for these little these indicators that are reinforcing a sense of place, having these spaces feel like they're really of Bonnie Lake and they really belong to the community. You might be wondering, why is my photo there again? Well, I think that photo is there again to basically reinforce the idea that we're wanting these spaces to feel accessible. We want people, when they come to these places, to feel like they're welcome and that they're invited to make full use of them. And so positive examples of sense of place, you see, of course, the mural that you're all familiar with, kind of locating us in this place, things like the signage that you see to the left. Even if there can be some improvement, I'm kind of freshening that up. And then sense of place is also reinforced when facilities are maintained over time. We're not saying this as a critique. I mean, we know that that city dollars are stretched thin when it comes to maintenance over such a broad range of facilities. But these are just the things that we're wanting to make note of and make sure to make their way into our feedback in our report. And as you see there with the bicyclists, even when the gates are shut close and it's hard for some people to walk through, the very determined, cyclist gets their BMX bike into that skate park. So with that overview of the background and criteria, I'm going to hand it back over to Jean. And Jean, I believe you're going to walk us through basically a little bit more about what this all adds up to.
Yes. Thank you, Scott. Thank you for that good broad view. So we take all those pieces and those categories and the sort of perspectives that Scott shared with you, and we pull them together for each individual facility, park facility, trail facility. You can see them listed on the left side here. This working draft of the conditions assessment, we call it our matrix, is not meant for you to read it in this slide, but you can get a sense of, well, we've got the site names on the left, and then across the top are the different types of recreational amenities, the site amenities like site furnishings, lighting, signage, parking areas, then things like park structures, and then we go and do vegetation, and then we give a quick overview of ADA compliance. And by the way, I think I neglected to mention that for those of you that don't know what ADA means, that's Americans with Disabilities Act, which basically says we cannot show discrimination by creating barriers for some people with different skills or mobilities or whatever to not have access to public facilities. So, and that's my quick summary. But this matrix, as we put it in, we give things a ranking, a 1, a 2, or a 3. It's very simple. If it has a 1, it's in good condition. It shows up green on this. If it gets a 2, it's in fair condition. And I'll give you an example of this good, fair, and then the poor, which would show up as red if it's got a rating of 3. The good condition would mean it's serviceable, it's in good condition, we don't see any major flaws. It doesn't necessarily mean that, there is, it doesn't have a scratch or something, but it's functional and it works and it's safe. From what we can see, it's in good condition. So it's green. So you can look on this matrix. Can you see this pattern of green? You look at your natural areas. Every park we looked at that had natural areas was in good condition. Now, we're not ecologists, forest ecologists, so we're not looking at it from that perspective. But from the quick visual of a landscape architect, they looked like they were doing pretty well. In general, look in the middle of that matrix, in that column, lots of green. It happens to say signage up there, and then there's a red right in the middle. Madrona Park got a poor rating for its signage because there's a teeny little brown sign on the opposite side of where the driveway access is. It doesn't work very well for welcoming people and telling them to get there. But the good, the fair, and the poor, I'll give you an example with a tennis court. If it's very playable, very serviceable, it's in good condition, it's got a 1. If it's in fair condition, maybe it's got some hairline fracture starting, maybe the net posts are starting to rust, but they're still strong, it's still playable, but we know that in the coming years, that's going to need to be addressed because it's starting to wear. If it's in poor condition, it's got cracks that affect the bounce of the ball. Maybe the nets are missing. There may be holes in the fence. There may not be access for the, through a fence. There's all sorts of variables for if it's in poor condition, it really needs attention. So you notice on the far right column going down, there's a lot of red under what is the ADA column, the compliance column. And that usually tells us that there are a lot of facilities that are older, that predated a lot of the requirements for the Americans with Disabilities Act. So whenever anything happens in those parks that has anything to do with where those compliance issues are that got the poor rating, you're going to want to make sure that you do some upgrades, some modifications that include removing whatever barriers were identified. We saw in those pictures that Scott showed of 2 different playgrounds and the material used to keep the play safety service in place, the engineered wood chips, but that's something that you couldn't wheel a wheelchair in, or a child who's confined to a walker wouldn't be able to get across that. That would be a major barrier. A parent or caregiver wouldn't be able to get across if they had some mobility issues. So those types of things are things that are fairly easily remedied. But this is the overall scorecard. And that's where we had that little thermometer that sort of pointed towards halfway between fair and poor, because there's a lot of orange and red in this. So those are things that are telling us in the base conditions, this is what you've got. And by going by color, you can say, well, we can see what we're going to need to address first. Things that are in red, definitely make sure they're on the list for the future. Things in orange better be on our radar for upcoming years in some form of improvements as well. So if we look at the next slide, what I want to be able to share with you is what this doesn't do. So it's a visual assessment, and it's based on what we can easily see. And we're recording it based on one-time visits. We didn't come in spring and then winter and summer and, in 3 or 4 different seasons to check on it, or weekends versus weekdays. We don't have the ability to record how functional your irrigation system is, or what. We're not looking at building interiors, and we're not doing anything, as I mentioned before, with full ADA compliance. But some things we can tell, like the outside of the concession building at Allen York Park, is showing some age. The irrigation systems for the sports fields, not giving full coverage. Some sections of the grass were greener than other sections, and you can kind of tell there may be issues there. And that's where we depend on the park staff to be able to tell us, yeah, we changed some heads there, or we don't have enough pressure, or we have to sequence it, or there's some soil issues or drainage issues that we may not be able to capture on a dry day, although I know that Scott's colleagues were out there on days where it's absolutely pouring rain, so they were able to look at a lot of drainage issues, but we can't always count on that. So this does require input from the staff to review what we see and tell us what we didn't see so that we get a complete assessment of everything. And then let's go to the next slide. And then the next steps, we've submitted the drafts to the staff to look at this, see where the gaps are. I'll be talking with park staff about operations and staffing and numbers and FTEs to see how this plays out for what you currently have and how it may compare. We are doing some comparisons with other places that have similar populations and looking at how many facilities do they have. How many FTEs do they have for the number of facilities, and doing some comparisons with that. The current assessment that we did should give you some ideas where you can do some immediate improvements. They may not need to wait for the full plan to be done or to modify some maintenance. And then we take these existing conditions to be able to relate to how we're doing open houses, how we're giving feedback during the public and the input to see what is the public notice and what are they suggesting. So this identifies some opportunities, but we also combine it with then all the public feedback, the staff feedback, and the rest of the process, the surveys, etc. So I'll stop there. We want to go to that next slide and entertain any questions.
Yeah, I've got a question.
Yes.
The thing that I'm most concerned about, obviously, would be the being out of compliance with the ADA. First of all, I saw ADA AG as well. What's the AG stand for?
Attorney General.
Okay, Attorney General.
No,
Now,
you know what? I anticipated this question, and it's the guideline.
Okay.
It's the accessibility guideline.
For outdoor recreation.
All right, good, thanks. How would our city be liable as far as sanctions or anything like that if we stay out of compliance with the ADA?
So older facilities that were put in before these requirements, you're grandfathered to a certain extent. Now, I'm not an attorney, so I don't want to pretend that I'm giving you a legal opinion.
Yes.
But basically, if your city doesn't already have an ADA transition plan, you should get one. And I'm sorry, I haven't looked at all the plans.
No,
No.
that answers it satisfactorily for me tonight anyway. Councilmember Evans?
Your initial work plan was broken down into 9 tasks. Where would you say what you just showed us falls on that?
I can speak to that.
Okay.
Yeah, go for it, Scott.
We were sharing today is essentially class 2.
That's
So we have
okay.
class 2 existing condition baseline analyses.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
which means we have a lot to still play with.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping. Yeah.
That's right.
Councilmember Baldwin.
Just so I'm kind of understanding, this original kind of consultation is just based on a conditions report, but you're saying that there's more to the consulting that's going to be moving forward, or is it just a general assessment right now?
Yeah. So our contract with the city, contract, has more to it than just this analysis. I wonder if Jason might want to speak to that.
I'll email you the whole scope.
Yeah. So the
Okay,
way
'cause
that
I feel like we were
so the way that
more, yeah.
hopefully I can answer that.
Okay.
Hopefully the way that a park plan works
Mhm.
is you have an assessment of your current conditions, right? You can't know where you're going till you know where you're at.
Mhm.
So that's usually kind of chapter one of your parks plan.
Mhm.
So tonight was just, this is the condition of our current facilities. This is what we currently have in the system. These are the challenges that we currently have with our current facility. So if we didn't build a thing, we didn't do anything else, this is what's currently in the system. These are the issues and challenges that we see with those things. Step two of this will be gathering the public input, one, to identify if there's other operational issues they see that we've missed, right? So what is the public's input on our current park system? Where are there pluses and minuses? Like, where are the things we're doing well? Where are the things we can improve? After you gather all of that input, which is going to kick off next month or later this month, you start then identifying what improvements you're going to make to the different parks. And so, as I promised when we did the initial contract, was we weren't going to bring this to you all at once at the end and say, here's the finished plan.
Mhm.
So we're walking you through here's where we're at. This is where the condition of our current facilities. The next step in this will be to begin to identify what things we need to improve from this conditions assessment and what additional new improvements we want to get built. And that's where the steering committee comes in and the sports roundtable and the public. So this summer during Bonnie Lake Days, we'll be having tables at Bonnie Lake Days saying, what do you want to see at Allen York Park? What do you want to see at Midtown Park? And then in the early fall, we'll be coming back to the council and the planning commission with, here's what the steering committee, the public, the sports roundtable identified as the needs and desires for all of the parks. So this is just the very beginning.
Okay, I feel though that you had stated that you were going to say some problems, but you also said that you were going to state some opportunities. Is that now or is it at another time?
Well, I think the opportunities will really come through in the recommendations.
Okay.
Certainly.
Yeah.
That will be not, Gene, Steve, Bryce, myself, our thoughts, but it'll be what we hear from the community,
Okay.
what we hear from you all, and kind of how we translate that into specific recommendations and even some specific design ideas.
Okay.
Jason, you were saying that next month you're going to be starting with the public input?
Yeah, so our first,
how are you doing that?
So our first kickoff is going to be with the steering committee, getting them kind of brought on board. Councilmember Baldwin is on the steering committee.
Yes, she is.
Planning Commissioner Hubler is on the steering committee. There's a representative from the Senior Center, a representative from the Arts Commission, representative from the development community. I think I have them all. There's 6 or 7 people that have been chosen to represent different kind of, for lack of a better word, interest groups that'll begin to help bring that forward. The next part of that is going to be also getting the sports roundtable up. We didn't feel like we could identify one person that would speak for all the different sports groups that want to use the parks. So we're coming up with a sports roundtable where we talk to those interests individually as a table to hear what those things. The second part is we're going to be with Leslie Harris and our public engagement officer is start rolling out kind of when we'll be doing public engagements. A lot of the hands-on and public engagement is going to be during the summer through the Bonnie Lake Days, where we can actually talk to people, plus some open houses. And then as we get closer to those, we'll be doing push outs on social media, the city's website. There's also a contract amendment coming forward at the 28th to provide us some funds to do a community survey. We had hoped to have that funded by a grant, and it didn't happen. So that's going to be coming forward to do a kind of a community survey. And I would say let's save the discussion on the community survey till that meeting next week.
Okay.
Because that was one thing that we had a big, long discussion at CDC on. And I would say, not to derail this, that is coming forward. But that's how we're generally doing the public engagement piece.
Saw me jump at that, so good. All right, any other questions? Councilmember McClymonds?
Yeah, so have we considered including some of the HOAs in Bonnie Lake in part of that community survey? So Lake Jane, they run a park, right, that has a lake and a pool, right? So that community, might have valuable input. Sky Island, there's quite a few HOAs that it would be good to get their input on what they feel is valuable for parks or is not appropriate.
Yeah, we are collecting all of the HOA contacts that we have.
Okay.
And we will be sending out something to the HOA's board and then letting them know what's going on so hopefully they can begin to interact with us on that process.
That's a good point, thank you.
But if you have contacts to any of them, I don't have the one for Lake Deborah Jane. So if you have contact information for any of the HOAs, please
We can do that.
please send them to me, and we're gathering all that so we can engage with them.
Okay.
Sorry, Scott.
Did I see your hand? No. Okay. Any further questions on the matter? Okay. So essentially what you're saying is that we do have further discussion on this on next week's agenda?
For specifically contract funds to do a community survey.
Okay.
And I would, like I say, thank you, Gene and Scott. More to come on this, but we wanted to give you an assessment. And it's important to note that this is the type of projects that we don't fund with park impact fees. These are maintenance projects that we have to fund kind of out of the general parks fund. So as we move forward in the process, there's going to be funding needs for both this type of work and also the new stuff. And I think sometimes we get so focused on building the new stuff that we don't pay enough attention to the old stuff. And so it's important just to kind of keep this assessment in your mind as we talk about the needs for parks and capital improvements for parks and which ones are kind of maintenance versus new facilities.
Okay, and commissioners, did you have any questions? It just wasn't limited to the council members or myself. Okay.
Gene, you can log off unless you want to stick around for everything else.
Thank you, Jean.
Nope. Thank you very much. Yep. I'm off.
Oh, right. Well, do we have any other open discussion right now with the planning commissioners? Well, that seems like a bunch of crickets. So
Just one cricket. No,
Yeah.
just like I appreciate all the work that you guys do. I know staff generates a lot of stuff for you guys too, but I really appreciate all the work that you guys do for the years because we get the stuff down at our level, at the council level, and don't get a chance to really go through the details. So I really hope you guys, have robust discussions and critical thoughts that don't be afraid to push back on staff or what have you, because, we're there to support you guys and gals that are doing the work up there, because there's a lot of details that we never see at the council level. It's just much appreciated that you're able to go through all of those and make it easy for us for some of these things. It's just like, oh, they looked at it. We're good. Thank you.
Mr. Sullivan, did you have a
One of the things that we noticed, several of the members have been approached by citizens with, why don't you do something like this? And can you tell me about this? And going over the rules, it looks like we can initiate a project, bring it up, present it to the council, how are we doing? Can we keep going? And then bring up a recommendation. I'd like to get approval of that.
Well, absolutely, I think, but taking it to a vote of the council on that sort of thing sounds very, very positive. That's one thing that we've been working on, is trying to find out a better line, a more comprehensive way to approach the public on this stuff, because we want the public input on it. So that's my comment, but I don't know if I can actually say yes, go forward with that. Ms. Sullivan, and then Councilmember Watson. I'm sorry.
So what I was going to say is the general charge of the Planning Commission is to make recommendations and give advice to the city council on things affecting the future growth of the city of Bonnie Lake. So it's within the direct charge of the Planning Commission to do studies and say, council consider this, or, maybe you need to pass an ordinance for this, or maybe this is an issue, and provide those kind of technical papers back to the city council. And I've been encouraging the planning commissioners as they identify issues to bring those up, and hopefully here soon we'll have the staff on board to be able to support those efforts and be able to bring forward things to the city council that aren't ordinances, but topical areas that the city council could consider to provide direction back to the planning commission on how to address those issues that affect the future growth of the city. So I think that there was just, I don't know if it needs to be a vote, but just, I think the chair and I talked about it, and the chair wanted to make sure there was some general recognition that if we did that, there wouldn't be this kind of the planning commission's gone rogue type thing. So we just wanted to bring it up as a kind of a discussion point, because it's not necessarily something that's called out specifically in the work plan, which is attached, but just kind of throughout the year, things come up.
Right.
And questions come up from the public, and being able to bring forward memos or information to the city council to consider. Any ordinance change would definitely come back to the council for consideration too. So I think that's where that was coming from.
Okay, Councilmember Watson.
We had a long discussion tonight at CDC about the proper way to get public input in this, and we didn't come to a conclusion. A lot of good ideas, but that's something we're still working on. What's the best way to go? And that's for us future discussion too. So we didn't approve.
I think we need to get Commissioner Sullivan to go house to house. You start up here and just keep on going. Anyway, as Jean-Luc Picard said, make it so. Go forward. Did you have,
yeah, I was just going to say I agree, and just so you have some general knowledge of what some of the council members are thinking, I don't have a problem with that. I think any way we can get information from the public through to the government, to us at this point, is great. So I appreciate it. Thank you for bringing it up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Well, I think it was first. So.
Oh, who had their hand? This like to tell the truth. Let's Councilmember Swatman.
Right, and just keep in mind the scoping thing of it, right? Because if the small things are easy type of thing, but then that's why we have the work plan, of course. Because if it's a meaty element or what have you, then it's good to have the council's initial buy-in on that. Yeah, we should be working on that type of thing, because of course there's staff time involved and everything. So a lot of little things can be done easily enough, but some of the larger things are like, you've been around long enough, Mr. Sullivan, to know that some of the things are like, we spent all this time working on it, and then the council just trashed it.
You don't want to have the council say, how did we get into this?
Right.
Yeah. So, I believe we ask that every day. Oh, Madam Commissioner.
Opinion, yeah. I was just looking through our work plan. We have a few things that we need the public's input on it, and we always, not in past commissions, whenever we ask opinions on something, there's usually 3 or 4 side comments of oh, we should also be looking at this. So I think that was one of the things we were talking about. It's just when we get input from the public of things that we're not asking for, can we look into those further and see if they're things we should look into or not. So,
yes.
Thanks for that.
That. So, okay, any further open discussion?
I do think we should at least touch on what's in the planning commission work plan, because we'll be asking for the council to vote on that next week.
Okay. Well, I was reading it about an hour and a half ago, but
yeah. So I just want to make sure that council understands, because by resolution, the council established a rule that the work plan should be voted on and approved in the first 2 months of the biennium by resolution. So I think just kind of a general overview of that work plan would be good to make sure there's no questions next week. There's a couple of them that are standard, which is the 2023 and the 2024 Development Code Maintenance Package Amendments. Those come every year. We'll do one this year. We'll do one in 2024. The second one is we're going to try to see if we'll be able to get the Midtown, or a portion of it actually, designated as a countywide growth center. And there's some work that we have to do for that. We'll actually have to identify an area of Midtown. Midtown as a whole is too big to meet the standards adopted by PCRC. So we'll have to identify an area that's a subset. That'll be something that we work on with the Planning Commission that comes forward as a recommendation.
Yeah, I had plenty of questions on that one in looking at it. It is, but I think I can wait until when it comes along. So what exactly are we looking at as far as the countywide designation here, we're looking at 100, I mean, how big as far as acreage?
I believe it has to be 160 acres.
160 acres over, and Midtown is what, 16,000 acres?
How big is the Walmart parking lot?
Yeah.
I don't know, but all of Midtown is about 750 acres.
750 acres.
Yeah, so we actually would be looking, what we've initially targeted is the area around 214th, because it's not going to bring any additional planning requirements for us to be a designated countywide center, because we already have those in the comp plan. What it does do is when we apply for grants through PCRC or PSRC, we actually get higher points. It makes our grants more competitive.
That was my second question, because I read that term, points. Can you explain that to me?
So when PCRC and PSRC score regional grants and countywide grants to provide transportation funding to projects, there's Councilmember Evans seen them, there's probably a 10 or 15 page packet that you have to submit with the grant, and there's points tied to different elements. And one of the elements that is in there is the project within, or does it project connect, or does it support a center? And as you kind of move up from a countywide center to a regional growth center, you get more points. If you're not in the center at all, you don't get any points. And typically these grants are 1 or 2 points makes the difference between funding and not funding. Because we're all working toward making sure everything we have supports the highest point on the grant application. So downtown right now is a countywide growth center. We got it designated a couple years ago. We want to target Midtown, but we need to have a discussion on what section. Our initial recommendation is trying to focus around 214th because we have a huge transportation project there that we need to get funded, whatever that improvement looks like. And so making sure that intersection is within that countywide growth center helps us there. So it's an application we're going to make to PCRC, but we first need to identify the area, and that's really where the council and the planning commission are going to come in, is making sure that the area we identify is the correct area.
Councilmember Evans.
On future work plans, if everything goes according to Mr. Lear's plan out there, would we be able to go for an MIC at some point?
Yeah, we're just waiting for the jobs.
Okay.
Because we don't have 1,000 acres, we have to have 500 jobs.
Okay.
Right now, we're sitting, after I've talked to Chris and done some other kind of back of the napkin math, I think we're somewhere around 200, 250 jobs. So we're about halfway there. So I don't even think it's all of Chris's project. I think in 2025, you'll see that on the work plan, because they only do them an odd number of years. So 2025 will be trying to get Easttown identified as a countywide manufacturing center.
And what would MIC stand?
Manufacturing Industrial Center.
Thank you. Councilmember McClimans.
Yeah, so regarding element 3C, housing availability, diversity, affordability project.
Yes.
So I feel like we kind of slipped into that because we accepted that grant for the housing action plan.
Yes.
And I just want to make it clear that, I'm suspicious of anything in there that would going to erode the character that Bonnie Lake has as a suburban single family home area, and that we get over urbanized. Right. And so I don't know, I don't think there's any polite way to say that, but a lot of people spend a lot of time on the road to not live in Tacoma and Seattle and Federal Way. And I don't think this smells to me like it's a way to bring Federal Way to Bonnie Lake. That is definitely not something I would endorse and I would be for. So anything that the Planning Commission brings forward that would enable that to come in, or take away the council's ability to, kind of protect this area, with the housing that it is, I think I would be suspect of.
So I will put out to the council that these are items that there was a list of specific items that were identified by CDC, CDC unanimously voted on that we should consider. And those are the items that we are considering as part of this project.
And I thank you for that excellent work, because you know kind of where we're at. So I appreciated you doing that, and that's what's there. But I didn't want to lose that history, because we don't get to see the Planning Commission much, right? And the thing is, some of this stuff comes in at you sideways, master builders are saying, this is good, I want to do this. And because it's good to build lots of apartments. But when we build lots of apartments, there's taxes that come with that. And those taxes erode some of the character that we currently have that people committed to. And, you know, for the last 10 years, they've paid that tax. And we don't want to snatch that out of their hands, in particular, is what my concern is.
Councilmember Baldwin.
I just wanted to echo the same sentiment. I also looked at 3C with reasonable suspicion as well. So I echo the same sentiment.
And I will,
Councilmember Swami.
You had staff input first.
I was going to say the way that 3C works, it's a two-step process. The first process is going to be preparing a technical memo that will come back to Planning Commission, specifically identifying the things that will happen that will be approved by resolution, and then we'll do the code work. So you'll actually see it kind of twice, knowing that there's some political sensitivities around this issue.
Okay. Councilmember Swami.
Yeah, I just joined my other previous council members in, you know, the sensitivity to that over urbanization of an area, because definitely the community character of Bonnie Lake is, you know, largely single family, but we do need obviously multifamily housing in different aspects and different types of housing in different areas. Just, you know, again, keep in mind that when it comes before the council, that the council will be very wary of trying to, you know, simply do away with single family or something like that would be like really not desirable in my mind. But when do we comment on the other things in here too? The plan? I don't know if can I move down to another issue?
I think you can.
Okay.
I mean, I think the whole plan is up for discussion right now.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mm-hmm.
The advisory tasks there, because there's 2 advisory tasks listed there. So the downtown master plan sounds great. When, to me, getting more input on that is great.
And I'm sorry, what page are you on? 13.
13. Advisory task, downtown master plan.
Mm.
So that's that. In other words, that there isn't a real necessity for the planning commission to look at that, but it's a good idea type of thing.
Yeah, since there's not a decision for the planning commission to make, but we did want to at least talk to the planning commission about the 2 options that we're going to be presenting to the council probably late spring, early summer about what to do with downtown, just to gauge kind of what the kind of charge of the planning commission is, advise future growth plans before we bring those 2 options to the city council in the spring. So this is kind of one of those technical research memos that you would be seeing.
Yes, I love that. I like that. The other one I had a question on, those the Veterans Memorial Drive Angeline intersection analysis. It appears to be kind of a technical analysis, you know, and I'm kind of wondering, well, what's the deal with the planning commission looking at that?
The idea is behind as part of the public engagement piece of that is just to have another kind of opportunity for people to speak to it, have the people who are, as I said, advising on future growth patterns to provide input from a non-technical side that can be brought into the final analysis for the city council.
Yeah, because if you think that'll provide value and the planning commission wants to entertain that, I don't have a problem with that, I guess, because I would think that hopefully when it gets to the council level, you know, if we're successful in planning some decent intersection improvements in that area, that we'll have another public hearing to make sure, you know, so, because those are, hopefully there's going to be a significant change in that intersection. But, you know, it'll be challenging. That's a very geographically and topographically strange area to work with. So.
And Councilmember Evans.
On that same note, is the county going to be involved in that conversation at all, since it may encroach upon potential wetlands out there? And
all of the property, except for if you went to the, I guess for the lack of a better word, west. I think that's the right way.
Yeah.
East. Yeah, toward the
east would be us, west would be California.
Yeah, there may be some there. We don't know yet. If we do that way, we would be involving the county in that property. We're trying to stay. Yeah, and we're trying to stay within the confines of the city and then the connectivity down to the trail, as Ryan mentioned. So there will be some conversations with the county as we move through this. I just don't know to what varying degree.
And what is our initial intersection control evaluation expectation there?
I don't know that we really.
We don't have one. That's why we're doing this. We're really walking into this as of all the 3 options, which is do nothing, because you always have that as an option. do a roundabout or do a signal, which one is the best, not just from a flow pattern, but land cost, improvement value, safety. What are when you look at it in totality, which is the best option? We've debated it and we've come up with pros and cons for both. And so it's going to be interesting to see what the analysis looks at when you look at all of those kind of different variables.
Well, do you have any inkling of an idea of how much influence the county would have on that? Because we know that they would be leaning towards a roundabout.
The county actually doesn't have a lot of input because this is a pure City of Bonnie Lake intersection.
Okay.
All the improvements would occur in the City of Bonnie Lake, except if we have to go outside the city onto private property.
Right.
It's in the county that we would have to acquire from a private property owner. And they've already talked to us about whether or not, and they're part of that process. It's the Corliss's property.
Well, it's nice to have full control of something.
Yeah, so we have a lot more control over this one than some of the other intersections.
Okay. Any further? Councilmember Baldwin.
Sorry, just last thought, may hold nothing to it, but in regards to the downtown master plan, and I've seen it, and all those kinds of things. I know we own lots of the property in that area. Is our focus still going to be that we place downtown there?
Here?
Yeah, like in this area, or would the vision ever be to move it to Midtown?
I think with us buying 90% of the land here, I think it probably still would be here. I don't.
Well, I think this is always going to be.
I mean, to me, that's the money that we.
Well, yeah, I think there's different ways. I mean, the area around here is just defined as downtown, right? Like, I mean, that's where the justice. That's what it's just always been historically called. The questions that we're going to present to the Planning Commission and also to the City Council really revolve around kind of two options. One, with all the stuff that we've done, is the downtown area, that 90 acres, really a future civic campus, or should it be something else? If it should be something else, shops, stores, residential development, do we lay it out, or do we issue a request for proposals and do similar to what we're doing in Easttown with a developer, where we're bringing the land and they're bringing the capital and the designs?
Okay.
So those are that's kind of the question, is what does that 90 acres become? I think it's always going to be referred to as downtown, but what does that future 90 acres look like, given the fact that we built the public service center, which was not envisioned when we did the original downtown plan, the fact that we have the Justice and Municipal Center, the fire department's leaving the public safety building. With all those variables, what does that 90 acres become?
So the 90 acres isn't looked at as an asset that we have here in the city, because we own the
property, but because we own the property, it's completely off the tax rolls. So the only thing that it's generating is any of the leasehold revenue that we have from some of the buildings. So the question is are we going to hold it and develop it as a civic campus where it's just another building and more civic space? Or does the council want to develop it as more of a mixed use 90 acres, kind of like Kent Station, where there's residential and commercial development on those properties? And then how do you want to do that? So those are kind of the three questions that we're going to be exploring with the Planning Commission and the City Council.
Okay.
No answers at this point.
Right.
Councilmember Klein.
Yeah, so I would really like to swap Tarragon for their property for this downtown. They could build some way tall, way cool view things that they can make a lot of money on, and it's close to the entry point for transit. So for multifamily, it makes a lot of sense to me. And then we have a big park over in the Midtown area, right? And because that Tarragon development over there just kind of scares the heck out of me, that you got a whole bunch of people in a little bit of space and there's no public transport. It's nice that Safeway's there, but they got to get places.
And I want to misspeak. I misspoke. We own 90% of what we refer to as the downtown plan. The downtown is 5 acres maybe? Yeah. And so Tarragon's property is 70 acres. So I think that the likelihood of switching 5 acres for 70 acres
I don't know. Sounds fair.
I don't know
It's
how
the
much
best
view. It's one of the best views in the Puget Sound.
But no, I think all things are on the table, and looking at those types of things is what we want to study and explore. We're not coming with a solution. We're coming with options and exploration of questions that the city council needs to weigh in on.
Okay. All right, Deputy Mayor Carter.
I just wanted to say thank you for that, because I felt like a few years ago that there was like, this is the route we were going, and now it seems like we're open to some more different opportunities. So I just want to say thank you for doing
No, I appreciate that as well. Anybody further? Oh, Councilmember Swanton.
Did somebody else want to go? Great. No, so, and exactly right. Great to have all those options out there. So, and there's one option that I forgot to look at. I can't recall what it's called. Maybe you might, there's a land use concept where the community owns the land. It's kind of a third party kind of thing. I forgot what it's called. They use it in housing a lot. Anyways, the concept that's out there is, I think, very applicable, and we could have used it and probably should take it in mind to use it in the future possibly. Anyways, you can, like the library, right? The library we own, the public owns the land, the Pierce County owns the library building. There's a concept where you can still have the land and ownership and let people build on it privately or whatever, or in a consortium. Because the issue is that if you have public land, in my mind, and that you give it to a developer, or you pay a developer to develop something on your public land that you gave them, you transferred all of that wealth from the public to the private sector, right? And then that's what this kind of concept tries to take it into account, because they use it a lot in housing when they're trying to build affordable housing. Because if you give somebody land and say, build us this great thing there, and then we'll be all happy because we're going to get all the tax revenue off of it. Eventually they sell it and all, but you lost all the value in it. You transferred the wealth to them. So, but I'll dig it up and then send it to you guys. But there's lots of concepts out there. And Jason's absolutely brilliant. You just have to challenge him to think, outside the box a little sometimes.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that information. Want to send it on.
I figured that out. I couldn't remember.
All right. Anything further on this subject before we move on? Because we have a few things to get through. All right. Seeing no further open discussion on this, we'll close the special joint City Council workshop and Planning Commission meeting and continue with the regular City Council workshop. Commissioners, as always, you're welcome to stay.
Nice to see you, though.
Yeah, nice seeing your faces.
Family's doing well.
Yeah. Thank you.
You guys have a group email?
He works stages now, so it's considered a
Awesome.
full-timer now. Oh, yeah. 17 years
Oh, yeah.
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 You did 35.
Right. In furtherance of getting through timely, why don't we just,
You can be just now.
Councilmember Watson.
Oh, okay.
Open discussion.
Yeah, well, we have review of council minutes. Councilmember Watson, what do we have?
We have nothing. They're both great. They did tremendous job.
Actually,
Oh, Councilmember Fullerton.
I noticed a change, and I emailed Ms. Bashaw earlier in the council meeting, so I don't think she's gotten it yet, but there was one change that I felt needed to be made on the February 7th minutes.
Okay.
I don't know if I need to say
How
what
do
it
we
is.
say your
but-
last name? Besaw.
Besaw.
It's
I
Besaw.
apologize.
Okay. Now we're on to council open discussion. Who do we have? Oh, Councilmember Clemens.
Yeah, I have something. Could I pass out for the discussion to the council members?
Community land trust.
Right?
I would
Are you
welcome
okay with
it.
that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Please.
Great.
Make a note.
So, but before I pass this out, I want to say, so I have this library book, and I got to tell you a story about this library book. So my daughter-in-law comes to me and says, didn't come to me, actually came to the family and said, wow, we're freaked out. So it turns out that her dad went to the library and checked this book out with my granddaughter. And then they came home and they went to, they went to read it to their granddaughter at bedtime. And the book, when you read it, it's called 10,000 Dresses, says, don't trust mom and dad. right? When you get to the last page, it basically says, it's a story about, where the child goes to mom and says, hey, I got a problem. Mom says, go away. Goes to dad. Dad says, go away. Goes to a brother. Brother says, go away. And then she goes to a perfect stranger, and the stranger says, oh, I can help you. Right? I'm very concerned about that. Because this doesn't come by itself, right? I mean, tonight at the Puyallup School District, they're talking about a policy there where they're telling teachers they don't and should not talk to parents about their child's choice of pronouns. And then I attended the Sumner Bonnie Lake School District meeting earlier this week, and they have similar problems that are coming. So there is a concerted effort in our society to keep mom and dad from knowing what's going on. So that's the motivation for this. I have names on it, so I don't miss anybody.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
Gwendolyn. So this is an ordinance that I would think that would help us make sure that parents are notified whenever children are put at jeopardy or risk when it comes to topics that mom and dad should know about, for goodness sakes. I mean, I would never thought that would have occurred in a library book aimed at a my granddaughter, right? He took the book out and the
nice.
The grandfather, my
Good.
daughter-in-law's dad, he's crushed. Because he feels like, oh, I let everybody down. That's for you. That's for you. And legal counsel. So it has a copy of this. I sent it to her. So go ahead and take the time to read it this week. We don't have to talk anymore about it.
Okay.
Just know the motivation is I'm trying to explore ways that we can ensure that we have a way that parents can feel like their children, they'll be notified when their children are receiving information. Because realistically, if my son and his wife didn't take the time to read their children books every night, who knows what this little girl would have been taken home, right? I mean, because they're involved and they're active in that and it's part of their thing, they would do it. But I can imagine a child going to our library, and this is available at our library. This very same book is available at our library across the street. And I don't want to ban books. I think it's awesome that we have freedom of speech, and this is in the library. I never say we should take it out, but I just want parents to know that that's what the kids are facing, right? And there's a concerted effort in our community, especially in Washington State, to cut parents out. And when I saw that, and then I heard a director from the school board going, "Look, I would love to fight this, but I can't." Right? I'm gonna approve this policy because I can't stop it. Right? And if you go listen to his testimony, he went on for 20 minutes about how frustrated he was. Well, he can't, but we can. Right? So because we do have the power to legislate and we do have the power to make ordinances, this is an existing ordinance that we've adopted. I think that we can amend to say parents need to be notified, right?
Okay.
And I think it's a good starting point. So anyway, we can talk about it more. I asked Deputy Mayor to put it on the agenda, but I wanted to let you guys know at a workshop and give you time to think about it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councilmember Clens. Your concern is very well taken. I want to be able to research it. Councilmember Baldwin.
Yeah, highly disturbing. Thank you for bringing our attention to this because I have a little girl too. I guess my question here is this, are you proposing a brand new ordinance, or are you proposing that we change some sort of code?
This is an amendment to an
Okay.
existing ordinance.
Okay.
Right. So I looked at the ordinances that we had that I thought would be a good place for us to say, how can we insert parental notification without stepping on like free speech, without violating, without like coming across like we're banning books and things like that, but just as put some mechanism in our ordinance to say, look, you got to tell the parents, right? If you choose to do this, you got to tell the parents.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's really all I'm after, is a way. And then for people who are trying to make these decisions. I think it just is that second step that keeps them from going, I'm not going to do this because there is something out there, right? Because when I look at, anyway, so that was the intent, is that it's an existing ordinance. It's amending 968.130, which already exists. And basically what it is it changes the definition in it removes the exemption in the definition for anthropologic reasons, and then just says, but if it is for an anthropological, which is a valid case, that you have to simply notify the parents that you used it for anthropological purposes. That basically says educational, right? So if you use it as part of your curriculum, or if you're counseling somebody, or if you're distributing some material that is deemed as, it's anthropological, then it's just trying to understand that people and this is not, anyway, so Jennifer probably can give us a better understanding of where this crosses the line, what lines it crosses, if any. But this is not the obscenity, nor is it the pornographic statute. It's simply the sexually explicit material statute, which is separate from those.
Okay, Councilmember Evans.
I'm looking at our code right now, and it stops at 9.17.
This is adopted by reference, right? So this is one of the cases where we adopted the Washington State definition of these by reference. And so when you go into our code, you get to this section because we adopted it by reference.
No, but our section stops at 9.17, and it goes to 10.
So 9.68130, is that the revised Code of Washington, the RCW reference site?
Right.
Okay.
Oh, okay, so not the Bonnie Lake necessarily. So that's the RCW?
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's probably there. I'm not an attorney. This was just
I just wanted to see what
my
it was
first
referencing
shot at it, right? Trying to figure out. I thought I would at least try to begin to figure out what it would look like.
So sorry.
I was going to say, how is this enforceable? Or in who's it enforceable?
It's already, part of it's already enforceable. This is already a misdemeanor.
Well, yeah.
Right? If I were to flash up out at a bus stop a bunch of.
No, I get that. No, I'm talking like the library has this book.
Mm-hmm.
We pass this resolution.
I think libraries are exempt. They have different controls, right? But if somebody's in the library trying to distribute this stuff, right, that would be different, right? Definitely, like if you're in the library, I would think this would be more the case where somebody's in the library on the computer viewing pornographic material and there are no controls in place, that's inappropriate.
Oh yeah, no, totally on that. I'm
okay.
just, I'm just trying to link,
right?
Not the point of this, but the enforcement of it, or
so let's say
that's
a great question.
A resolution,
That's a great place. So let's say there's let's say that there's a teacher that wants to share explicit sexual material as part of their curriculum. Well, this would say they could do that, but they have to notify the parents. The school board would probably then wind up knowing exactly what was being shared, as opposed to a teacher saying, well, this is just some of the sexually explicit, or this is some of the sex ed, or I was counseling this child about their pronouns, right? So we know there have been cases documented where that sort of thing has occurred, right? And so this is just making sure that teachers understand that so that they can say, look,
no, I get
this can't happen.
Yeah.
Right?
Now, from the teacher standpoint, I believe where it would fall under is the mandatory reporting statute, which would go to the principal, which would then be referred over to a law enforcement agency who would come out and do the investigation. Then it would be referred over to the prosecutor's office at that point. And
we have authority over a school district to.
It would be
notify if they're within, because it wouldn't be the school district; it would be the schools within our city limits.
Right.
So
it would be, the jurisdictional issues with this really do need to be hammered out. And Councilmember Clemens, you did send a copy to Ms. Robertson?
I did.
Okay.
And she said she'd get back to us in a week or two.
Very
I
good.
just wanted to bring this up and give council a chance to think about it so that when she does bring it up, it's not like, right? So, because this is something probably takes a few workshops to kind of work through, right?
Mm.
Figure out these questions.
Well, thank you, Councilmember McClymons. Righty. Councilmember Baldwin.
So are we changing this then to RCW, because this is indeed an RCW, the 9.68.130?
I think once it goes through like legal for all of
Yeah.
that stuff, that, the typos and
Okay,
all
cool.
that legal would get.
And I just wanted to come in your defense, Kelly. I know that you are, stating freedom of speech, but like it's not freedom to expose children, to things that parents don't know about. And so that is not a freedom that people have to expose children to sexually explicit things without parents knowing. That's not okay. And
No, that's
I
quite
very
right.
much appreciate you spearheading this, and because this is not an issue of freedom of speech. This is an issue of exposing children to things that the parents don't know about. And
And
that's,
just for Councilmember Fullerton's curiosity on this, if you look at US v. Debs, it would, back from the World War I era, that actually explains what Councilmember Baldwin's talking about, and that you can't yell fire in a crowded movie house.
And when you look at the RCW, when you look at that section 968, 50 through, I believe it is 120, is, if you read all that, there's a lot of good case law there that talks about all the tests that are in place and how that works. And this particular, I don't know. I mean, I'm not an attorney. I didn't do it, and I didn't think this would ever come up in my lifetime, really. And I'm kind of sad that it did. But the reality is that when there's an agenda that's in a library book aimed at a child to separate them from their mom and dad, and then we see that the schools are their hands are tied because of the way the policies are being rolled out. We can try to say within Bonnie Lake, can we say something within Bonnie Lake to say, no, look, here, you can do those things, but you have to tell the parents, right? We're not going to ask you to tell the parents. This isn't an opt-in. This isn't an opt-out problem. This is you must let the parents know that you're telling, and it's not, I'm not saying you got to tell them the whole sex curriculum. I'm saying if you're going to expose them to sexually explicit material, which this is a well understood definition by the state that has passed muster, I would assume that that's an easy bar to slip under, right? It's like the only reason they can do something like this in the schools now is because of the change in definition, because it's anthropological, right?
Councilmember Fullerton.
Yeah, so obscenities and sexual abuse of children, this is abusive, is not protected speech. And it is actually a federal law that you cannot expose yourself or have obscene reading material or visual, like movies, in a public place, including especially an airplane, because I've had to have people removed. So I do understand federal laws as far as obscenities go. It's actually in my flight attendant manual. So this, to me, I don't know how the school district is actually getting away with this, because and I don't know how we're allowing sexually explicit materials in our public libraries, because children have special areas in the public libraries, and that is one thing that I brought up with our new librarian, was that the computers are not monitored, and they have free public access, but there have been instances where one of the citizens approached me and asked me why somebody was watching pornography on the computers in the library, and those computers are in the middle of the library. So the little kids can walk around. Some of their books are in the back of the library, some of them are in the front of the library, but they can see everything that's on those computers. And so I did ask the librarian if there was a possibility that we could maybe section those computers off so that they're not visible, like have them up against a wall so that they're not visible to somebody behind them.
Yeah.
Because if we can't stop them from watching pornography because everybody has to have access to whatever they want to look up, I don't know how that got to be okay and that they couldn't put a blocker on that, but apparently the libraries have some kind of an exemption. Anyway, I'm just saying I'm in full agreement with seeing what we can do to make this an ordinance and figure out what we can do in the library. I mean, these books should be in a special section because
point well taken with
a lot of these books actually do have visual pictures, you know, and it's available for anybody to check out. So,
And Councilmember Baldwin. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Sorry, Linda.
Who does the purchasing at the library then?
librarian.
Just any librarian?
Don't know that. I was thinking it was under the county's purview since it's a Pierce County library system.
Pierce County Library.
This is very disturbing. This
But it's on our land, according to Councilmember Swanman, so.
It is.
Their building.
Yeah.
Their
Building our
operation.
property.
Deputy Mayor Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we're getting in the weeds a little bit here. I don't want to try and set library policy on what they do. So if they have laws that are specific to them, having computers out in the middle, if you read this RCW, specifically talks about a thoroughfare and it not being legal. So currently it's not legal for them to do that. And so it's on a case by case basis though, that enforcement would occur. So I think it's good to just leave that where it's at. I agree. I like your ordinance. I think we should probably just look at that moving forward from here because I think we're getting off in the weeds.
Yeah, I need to flesh it out first and then bring it back for full discussion. I think Deputy Mayor Carter's point is very well taken on this. All right. That being said, let's move on. Do we have any other open discussion before we move on? Councilmember Evans.
I talked with Deputy Mayor on this earlier today, and I wanted to throw this out there. I don't like to mention federal politics in here, but if we talk, I'm just saying names here, okay? So if I said Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, even Jay Inslee, Maria Cantwell, Patty Murray, they've all been in office for a very, very, very long time. Some in this room would probably say too long.
Not as long as Councilmember Swan.
Not as long as him, yes. But so I'd like to just throw out the idea and discussion of term limits for council and mayor for our city. I think there's some pros and cons to it with the learning curve of trying to get up to speed, but there's also some pros about it to get some people that, we've had a lot of people apply, and during our open meetings. Or their open positions that were very, very well qualified. And the chance of beating an incumbent is really, really, really hard. So, says the guy that's won 7.
Says the guy that's been beat several times.
But all I'm saying is, given an opportunity to some that may be able to do well, may not campaign well, but may have an opportunity to serve well. Just a consideration. Everyone's for them until it's theirs, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
No, absolutely.
See if anyone may have any thought on that.
Well, it should be considered. I think that's a very valid point.
Of course.
Councilmember Fullerton.
We actually do have term limits. It's called
elections.
We can be voted out very easily if we don't make people happy.
It happens every 4 years. She stole my comment. We do have term limits. You cannot serve over 4 years. I don't know, the public is cute about it or
Okay,
something.
maybe consecutive terms served then instead of a term limit.
Because what you end up with is you'll end up with Seattle. They had kind of a quasi, almost like workable city, and they decided to divide it up into wards. And so you get all of these weird, strange, in my opinion, political like enclaves that have significant power. It just doesn't make any sense to me to have term limits, because you end up with, you have a hard time finding people that even want to run for election to begin with. And then you're going to take some of your possibly worst, maybe your best council people, and just arbitrarily say that you can't serve anymore. Just, it's just weird. Yeah.
Would you be opposed to lifting the term limits on presidents and things like that?
Well,
I'm just trying
like
to
you
figure
said,
out.
that's a federal issue, right?
Well, I know, but I'm just trying
And
to.
I thought
figure
that
out
was in the
what's good
Constitution
for the
too.
goose,
So
good
that's
for the gander, or
when we
are
have a
cool with Inslee
constitutional
running for 4th, 5th, and 6th term because the voters vote him in. I mean, that's.
Well, the voters clearly pick the person that they want to serve in the spot. So I let the voters pick. I don't, why do you limit the ability of the voice of the voter by saying you cannot pick this person just because they've served before?
Absolute power absolutely corrupt. So, I mean, over time, you either die the hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. And also gives us an opportunity to look towards the future, too, if we, couldn't get out of our own way.
And Councilmember Watson.
I think you lose consistency with the council, because the staff has a lot to work with in their future plans. And when you have council members have experience, what's been through in the past, what's going on in the future, they help the rest of the newer council members step into their questions and answers. And as an older council person, including myself, you see their viewpoint looking at things too. When I first ran for, second time I ran for council, no one ran against me. I just applied, and I was the only person on, so I got elected. I think in the past has been quite a few times very few people have run against anyone else. Mm-hmm. So trying to get people that really want to make a difference and work with what's going on can be a challenge in these days. They're eager, people eager to make an opinion. They're not eager to get out there and work the hours that we do sometimes and dig into what's going on. So I think you're going to lose what you have going on now. I enjoy getting new people on here and changing out, and who knows, myself and Justin might go with this next year. But that's what it's all about. But you'll have council people are going to be on here and not look, okay, in 2 years I'll be gone. It really doesn't matter, or whatever it is. I think it's important to do what we're doing now, and it works well for us at this point. I don't know if any things that have happened that's caused by Mr. Swatman or myself being here for a long time that doesn't look at so we're making changes. We are making changes, and we're all seeing those different viewpoints. So I think we have is fine.
That's a point well taken as well. Councilmember Baldwin.
Yeah, I totally get what you're trying to say. It certainly makes sense. It definitely does. I know that I have been really excited to be able to work with all of you, because I think as a citizen that was outside and now is coming in, it's very much like, oh, we're really in good hands. Like this council really does care about the people, out there. And so I go back and forth with that. I totally understand what you're saying. I think it's good to have new. It's also good to have people, as long as they have the citizens' interests at heart. I think that's the whole kicker of it all, really. But just that knowledge, that long-term knowledge, and just an ability for people that have been here a long time being voted in by the people. Because when I look at my ballots, I am very cognizant of who is going to be representing. So I definitely make a conscious choice when something is open. And I think most of the citizens in Bonnie Lake do that. But, it's like that rapport that they've built with, the staff, and I think about the staff in regards to how often they have to explain and re-explain and re-explain and re-explain it again. And, oh, there's new people, re-explain that again and again and again. And so I think I'm okay with citizens if they want to vote in the same people, over and over again, because they do have term limits. I get the consecutive, like the back-to-back thing. But I really think in Bonnie Lake, people are choosing and voting with who they want. And so I'm okay with that. I think if, people were just put in, such as some of the folks that you mentioned that don't have term limits, at all in our career politicians, those those people need term limits. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, how can you be for one and not for the other when?
Well, I feel like we do have term limits. I just understand what you're saying as far as the consecutive is concerned. I think that's what you're trying to say.
And Councilmember McClellan. So, yeah, for me, this is a really difficult topic because I fundamentally think, I actually think term limits are humanitarian, because when somebody gets so involved and so enamored for so long, it's like, is there really other things that maybe they should be spending some of their time pursuing? But I don't think any council person on Bonnie Lake City Council is doing it because they want to be a power broker.
Oh, absolutely.
You're like, Pierce County power broker. And, well, I do love the motorcade, right? I mean, I do love that.
Yeah, that's
right?
a good thing. Yeah.
When the motorcade pulls up, I'm like, people are like, ooh, look at him. So I don't think we have some of the problems. I don't think we have some of the problems that other offices have, right? Some federal offices have serious problems. I don't get to inside trade, right? I get absolutely no ability to do that. And I could write a billion books and nobody cares about them, right? Unless I'm a very talented author, and I am not. You already pointed out probably typos, so, But so I look at it and I go, but fundamentally, I think term limits are a valuable thing to keep somebody from losing their way, right? I mean, that's really what that's about. It's to check power and to keep the individual from becoming so enamored in the system that they forget that it's public service, right?
Right.
So term limits is one way. That's kind of a hammer by which you can pound that in. Are there other ways that you can do that? Are there other things you can do that you can say, is the motivation really public service, right? The good news is at city levels, usually it will be public service because you don't get paid a lot and you're not really, it's not a career. Well, for some people it might be a career move, but I don't think anybody here is using it as a career stepping stone, right? We're here because we really do love our city and trying
Absolutely.
to make it better.
I just look at it as at that same reasoning. So the newer people, if you do have to turn over more, they're going to be more, and this isn't against anyone here. This is any possible council, any possible duration, because most cities don't have these. But, the longer you're in, the less, like you said, the less motivation you have, the less contact you have with the people. You've been on the ballot 6-8 times. You just got the name recognition.
Why would you say that? That's kind of an odd statement.
What?
Well, yeah, but you've ran in many elections.
True.
And how many doors is usually knocked on, right? And how much time and effort I don't see any connection between the length of service and your connection to the people.
No, I'm not saying it's a correlation. I'm just saying there's a possibility that the longer you serve, the less motivation you have to be out in the community, potentially.
That's not my experience. I wouldn't fault you for your comment, because as far as I'm concerned, I'm the council member that has been sued. The only council member that's been sued in federal court. Yay. The little known council member that's actually had developers hire private people to chase them around and try to dig up dirt on them. There's no non-connection between my experience and the people. My experience is that the longer you're here, the more likely you are to get ousted, because it is incredibly hard to keep, Mr. McClymonds is an excellent campaigner, and he came pretty darn close. If only there was some issues with, your logistics is what your problem was. But anyways, Mr. Hamilton handily beat me in an election. Miss Bowen beat me in an election. So that's what I'm just saying is my experience is that the longer you're around, the bigger target you are and the more difficult it is for you to actually keep your seat. Because, you could look at the actual examples in the room, how it goes, right? You've seen many come and go. So, the turnover, the actual real world here doesn't jive with what I'm thinking you're trying to
Well, you teased upon, if we didn't have a time constraint tonight, I would be asking about all those lurid details.
Right?
You just teased at. I will ask you eventually. Councilmember Fullerton.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like the federal elections, you're talking about people who are elected in the state and then they fly to Washington, D.C., where their base is, where we have to live in Bonnie Lake. We have to go shop in Bonnie Lake. We're with our people. You know, we have our friends and neighbors who know we're on council, and they come over and talk to us and ask us about their questions and concerns. We're living with the people, so there's no way I feel more connected now, because when people find out that I'm on council, I tell them, please ring the doorbell, knock on the door, come over, have a chat with me. I can't know what's going on if you don't tell me. And I hand out my business card like it's candy, and it's got my cell phone number on it, you know? So I feel like I'm more intertwined with the people than I ever was before. I don't have a group of people that I hang out with. I hang out with everybody that I meet in a store, you know? So.
Like I said, this wasn't
Yeah.
specific to anyone here. It was just, you know, like Kelly was saying, this is, you know,
Where we bandy about those things. And I think,
politicians
yeah.
are like diapers, right? They should be
Robust
changed
conversations
often
are
for
great.
the same
Right.
reasons. Is that
That's Mark Twain.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Councilmember
So how many terms would you think would be appropriate?
Oh, I was going to ask you the same
So,
question.
you know, just kicking around some ideas, I would either 2 full election cycles of 4 years and any appointment. So because any appointment, you're going to have to roll into the next election. But depending on, you know, you got appointed after an election, so you're 2 years. But I would say something like that, to where either max out at 11 years, because at most it would be 3 years on an appointment, 2 full election cycles. But I'm not opposed to even 3 at that point. You know, I'm not in the weeds on this. I'm just kind of kicking around the idea of what people think, and, you know, and just looking at that. And it wouldn't affect anyone here, because this wouldn't be until the next election cycle after that person. Not even, you know,
So
if Dan got elected for 3 more, that wouldn't even affect it, because
You automatically create a lame duck scenario too, right? You think about that. What's your answer for that?
yeah, but he also creates a motivation to get your agenda done faster.
No, not really. Well,
Wow.
that's an opinion, right? But there's also the lame duck. It's like, well, why do I care? Because I'm not running for election.
No, but do you think our county council member that represents our area thinks any less of it because his term is up? He can't run again. County council has max caps.
Yeah, they do.
Oh, they do.
Yeah.
They have the ward system too, ish district.
Didn't Bonnie Lake used to have the?
We did.
They did.
We did.
No
yeah.
one could run. No one would run.
That was like
They couldn't
really
get enough
hard.
people to run from that neighborhood.
I know that was really hard.
Yeah, man.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councilmember Evans, for bringing this up. You had mentioned it to me right before the meeting, and we kind of talked a little bit. I'm like, oh, that's an interesting idea. I brought up some of the same things that other people have brought up here as well, in both good and bad. There's good and bad to both, quite frankly. So I just enjoyed the discussion. Thank you for bringing it up. I'm not sure where I fall on it yet.
I don't either.
There's
I'm
definitely-
just throwing it out there. Because
And I think Deputy Mayor Carter has a very valid point there. There's good and bad in just about every issue, which is why we have 7 members of a council who discuss this thing. And I say bandy about, but this is how our government works, is just everybody getting their idea out there. And then we have a majority who votes on it. So at this point, this is like the grassroots of this particular issue that might be explored later, and how this goes. And I think in that regard, Councilmember Evans does have a very valid point in bringing it before the council to see what we think of it. All right.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I have an open discussion item still.
I'm sorry?
I have something to bring up, open discussion.
I was just about to ask that,
Thank
if we
you
had
very
any
much.
further issues. Councilmember Watson.
I've had 2 people question about the ball field that's coming along down there, about the turf. I remember intense discussion with Mr. Johnson about what we're using down there, whether it really was
Crumb rubber, right?
crumb rubber or not. And I was trying to refer to them when I talked to him what was there, and it was what we had was safe for the people to be on the field.
Right.
And I think this, I know we talked about a newsletter before, but things are going on or put on our Facebook page. They know what's happening, why we're doing it, and what's going on with those things. So the citizens are aware of what we've looked into, make sure it's safe for them, and work on the parks we saw tonight. Those type of things are important for the people to see that we're discussing. Now all of a sudden bringing up the summer we're doing it. So these, I would like to include the community in these things we discuss on a regular basis, and that's not getting out there.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. And we are working on that. Ms. Harris and Mr. Vodopich and me and others are working on developing a consistent newsletter that we can get out to the public.
Well, if we could do
I agree with you.
something on Facebook about the ball field would be wonderful too, what's going on with the safety and the stuff.
I'd like to know more about the turf, but not,
We had a
not
lot
in
of
this
discussion
meeting.
about
but,
that.
I'll go bother Mr. Johnstone one of these days. Okay, Councilmember Baldwin.
What are some of the issues with crumb rubber?
Well, it's not healthy.
Well, no, there's some
Some of it
products
isn't.
that were
Causing cancer.
well linked or
Linked to it, yeah.
I know it's recycled rubber, but
Yeah, it is.
Are you ready for this?
No.
Right, yeah.
We discussed a lot before.
Not ready at all. But I can tell you, in the past there was issues with crumb rubber that was from recycled tires that they found had carcinogens in it. I couldn't tell you if that's still the case or not. I know right now, though, what we're talking about doing with our field is getting the infill done, which will actually be done with sand. I would need to do a little bit more research to fully inform you about how that is all being constructed. But I can tell you right now that the methods that we've chosen are what are considered safe by industry standards and by users. So,
But what is the alternative that would not contain carcinogens? I guess is my question.
Grass.
Well, I tried to push for grass. I wanted
Okay.
grass.
But it wouldn't be all weather. See, so that's
Right.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
Are there all-weather options that don't contain carcinogens? I'm assuming no.
well, I think that industry has come a long way, and they've pretty much dealt with the idea of whether the infill material they're using or not could potentially cause cancer.
Okay.
But I can certainly come back at a later meeting with more information on that.
I feel like it would be through consumption.
If I could, Ryan, this is similar to what they use at whatever they call Lumen Field now, right?
Mm-hmm.
My understanding is yes.
Okay, yeah. And the carcinogens coming from, like you said, the
Oh.
recycled tire, which
Particles.
had the brake dust
Tiny particles.
on it, likely from the
Asbestos.
car.
Okay, yeah. It's the inhalation.
lovely.
basically, not
Yeah.
the-
Okay, Councilmember McClymons.
I was just going to say that the history of these type of fields, it's not just the infill material, but it's also the maintenance, because the fields get incredibly dirty with athletes. Depending on contact sports, you get sweat, you get all sorts of bodily
Yeah, we don't need to go
fluids.
completely into that.
Yeah, you get all sort of bodily fluids that get into the field that need to be cleaned out and moved along. And there's been a lot of good progress on it. This particular field I thought was pretty good, was a good solution. But it's, other than grass though, you're not going to get an all-weather field.
Mr. Mayor, a lot of discussion on this.
Absolutely.
Why to bring it up?
Deputy Mayor, you had a comment?
Not on this, another issue though. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've heard that there's some people calling or organizations calling to try and reserve the new field already, and that they are not been able to do so. Do we have a system set up or some way for them to do that at this point?
So Jack and I just met about that the other day. We came up with some items that we're going to put forward to you, the council here, coming up very shortly. We need to put together a presentation about what it is that we feel we need to do as far as fees, rental charges, rules using the field. Turf brings a lot of interesting rules that natural gas or grass does not have. Gosh, let's not open up natural gas. So you will be seeing that shortly. We have been doing work on that.
Oh, I look forward to that, Mr. Jones.
Thank you.
Okay, we do have two discussion items to go. Let's see, there would be item D. Madam Clerk, could you read the discussion out of action plan, please?
This is AB 2335, Resolution 3131. Council motion would be to authorize the mayor, Bonnie Lake Police Assistant Chief Ryan Boyle, and Emergency Manager Regine Creel to attend FEMA's Community Specific Integrated Emergency Management course in Emmitsburg, Maryland, May 14th through the 19th for 2023.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion on the matter? Councilmember Evans.
Do we need to have I know there's no one here, but legally a public discussion?
Usually you guys discuss first.
Okay, Councilmember Evans.
I'm okay with this, provided that everyone has most of the prerequisites done by the time of the event.
I can tell you that after our discussion last week, I have looked at the prerequisites and are already completed 2. So we've got 2 more to go before May.
I know you can do that.
All right, Councilmember McClymons.
I think it's marvelous. You're going to enjoy the cherry blossoms back there at that time of year. It's awesome. So I hope you do.
Well, according to
why are we bringing us to a workshop to vote on instead of a council?
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This was brought from Finance Committee. We had a discussion in regards to who was going, why they were going, if it should be staff all going or whatnot. And so we decided to bring it to council for a workshop to have that discussion.
And it's due on the 28th.
And it's due, like, we need
before the next council meeting.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Our letter of intent is due by close of business on February 28th.
Okay, Councilmember Watson.
Well, we appreciate your desire to go to the meeting, and we realize that you're the mayor and something happens, you're in charge of it. But our discussion was, from my point of view, that Ryan should go because he's in charge of, he'll be here for the long run, and he's oversees everything. He needs to know what's happening. But his involvement would be very important, where, again, how long you'll be here. Well, I'm assuming he'll be here for quite a long time. We discussed that, and he'd be the right person for us and not having our mayor go instead.
Okay, the question before I refer to our city attorney to explain it to you, Councilmember Watson, have you read the entire packet where policy is actually part of this workshop?
Right, yeah.
I've gone through it, but.
Okay. Madam City Attorney, could you explain it to our council, please?
Certainly, Mayor. So the question of who goes is really not in the council's purview. The question of whether you want to fund the program is within the council's purview, because the mayor has the authority to designate and direct staff. The council has the authority to fund. So I know that you guys have typically put names in resolutions. I would recommend that in the future, if you're greenlighting spending on out-of-state travel and training, that you fund the position to go. And there's a couple of benefits for that. One, it stays within the council's purview. But 2, if you put someone's name in and then say, for example, that person gets COVID, can a substitute go? Well, if their name is in the resolution, would be a question. But that's the different separation of powers. The mayor runs the staff and controls who gets to do what. The council decides what they get to fund. So hopefully that's helpful.
Ultimately, the resolution is whether you will approve per diem fees because Pierce County has already allotted the slots and paid for the travel and the and the thing. And the thing, I'm getting tired. Okay, Councilmember Swatman.
Was there, from finance, so was there a real preference to like not having elected officials go or something? Because I don't know the context of the training, but I can really see a high level of value in having executive elected officials go to these type of activities. But I don't know. I wasn't obviously in the discussion.
I mean, we looked at the org chart for this, and the elected officials are part of the policy making decisions, but not part of the emergency management. It's a side shoot of everyone that's responsible in the event of a emergency. So yeah, there is value to it. We have 3 spots. It's a matter of where is the value most served.
So what was the suggestion for the 3? Is that was to fund enough to do 3? Is that?
Well, that's all we get. We only get 3 slots. So it was a matter of who were the appropriate 3. You mentioned Ryan, I'd mentioned Chuck.
Right, but listening to the executive or the lawyers sounds like we should just fund the activity for 3, and then the staff has to figure out who they send.
That was going to be my next
Is that what it
To
is?
Make a motion to remove the names and just say 3 positions.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
Anybody want to second that?
I'll
Or
second it.
has it been
Well,
formally made?
Counselor, Deputy Mayor.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just throw, I'm for this and sending the mayor. I'm fine with it. I think it's an interesting question more for all of us is to the removing of names and that kind of thing, because there are certain names, maybe, as this is, well, we don't want a policy maker going or whatnot, then we could decide not to fund that. And so maybe it's important to keep it in. I don't know the answer necessarily, but I think I can see another side to that as well. So just throwing it out there.
Okay, Councilmember Baldwin.
I mean, just based on looking at who participates, it looks like people were selected appropriately. Elected and appointed official, boom. Senior level personnel from response agency, Ryan. Representatives from private agencies, Regine.
Oh, and just so you're
It
clear,
seems like they selected it based on who participates.
it's Ryan Boyle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's who I was referring to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because we have Ryan and
Senior
Brian
level
and Brian and
personnel
Ryan.
Sorry, too many Ryans.
They were also considering Ryan.
The one, senior level personnel from response agency, Ryan Boyle. So to me, it seems like they chose based on, they say who participates, so.
Okay, Councilmember Watson.
And I have no problem with you going. It was our discussion about who's the most appropriate for the
Yeah.
city in the long run and stuff.
Yeah.
As Mr. Evans brought up last time, Neil Johnston wasn't part of the fire at all. Now, he couldn't go to his house very often, but so Mr. Evans was down there the whole time overseeing what was going on. So it was a whole different circumstances helping down there. So whether it would be
For note, I did absolutely nothing but sit there. But
what
as
you
an
said.
elected official, there was nothing
Right.
for me to do. I saw Chuck and Patty and everyone else there running around doing exactly what needed to be done, and Chief helping out. I mean, you had firefighters, wearing badges that day because they were going out to the backside of Target here putting out fires before the fire department could get there because they were a little busy. So, everyone was doing a great job on that. But
I'm glad we're doing this. It's very important. Whoever goes is going to help us no matter what. Important thing.
All right, so, Councilmember McClymont.
Is there an amendment to remove the names? Yes or no?
Do we, I don't think we had the motion actually put forth. What's that?
yeah, we never got a second, so I'll withdraw my motion.
Just leave it alone for now.
Okay. All right, well, let's move on then, because this is on the February 28th. Well, I think we do need to address
we got to
whether
call
names
for the
stay
vote,
in or
please.
out. Right.
We have to call for the vote.
Okay, citizen comments.
Right.
All right, well, I'll throw it out there, and if no one takes, then I'll make a motion to remove the 3 names from this and move forward as is without the names tied to it.
Is there a second for that? Okay,
Second.
we have a second. Any further discussion on the matter? Okay, let's take that particular item to a vote, which would be a motion for the particular names within this resolution to be removed. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? All opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so we have a 6-1 vote on the matter. And we can move on to item number 2.
Mayor, you need to vote on the underlying motion.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
We had a motion and a second. We're going to public comment.
Yes. Thank you. Do we have any public commentary right now? Okay. Who is present to comment on the matter. Now we can take the matter to a vote. And remind me, Madam Attorney, what is the underlying matter that we're voting on? I thought this was going to February 28th.
No, we have to do it before then. So
You're
that
voting on the motion as amended, Mayor.
I see. Thank you. All right, let's vote upon the motion as amended, which would be Resolution 3131, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Body Lake of Pierce County, Washington, authorizing authorizing 3 spots to attend FEMA's community-specific integrated emergency management course. All in favor, say aye.
There was a hand
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
There was a hand raised.
We have
Do they have any
Rose
input?
his hand.
No, I did because I remember Justin had requested that we ensure that the prerequisites are met from the 3 people that go. Right?
Okay.
We don't need to codify that though, do we?
Right.
No, I think it's done on most already.
Okay, great. All right.
Okay. So I was actually looking down on the paper. How many ayes? How many nays?
Aye.
Oh, okay. Unanimous. All right. And pardon my weariness. It's been a very long day. Let's see. Now it's time to address council on item AB 2335, resolution 3131. Very good. Are we done?
I feel
Oh,
like
thank
yes.
goodness.
It's only 6.
Let's adjourn so I can drive home safely.
The meeting's just about to begin.
Wait.
That's what I keep forgetting to bring up.
Who's in charge of the clock?
Well, I always look at the digitals, so.